This is the Mezgers Only podcast with your host, Aaron, where we talk all things Mezger. All right, welcome to the Mezgers Only podcast. This will be episode 2. I'm your host, Aaron, and today we're going to have Ed Sheetz on, and we're going to talk a bunch of different Mezger things. That's pretty much the topics. That's always going to be Mezger related, so kind of get Ed's background, how he got into Porsche, while he's still in Porsche, why he has 3 different flavors of the Mezger, if he's going to get more, if he's going to get, have an entire, fleet. That's kind of relatable to what he does, so makes sense. So welcome, Ed. Porsche in general, how did you, I know you're a Volkswagen guy, I think, at heart, and then that's always seems to translate to Porsche in some fashion. Is that how that started, or is that the goal?
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, it seems that way. It seems like that's kind of the celestial path. Yeah, so a little bit of my history in the car world. My wife said I've made every hobby into a career, which I think at this point is pretty accurate. So, yeah, I started, let's see, I graduated from high school in 1992. By 93, 94, I already had a VW performance shop in the works with a partner. Actually, I had 2 partners when we first started, and that ended up being New German Performance, or NGP Racing, which is still
Nice.
alive and doing very well up in Maryland and Virginia, 2 locations. So shout out to my old partner Dave Graff on that, and mutual friend of ours, John Martin, stepped in when I exited, roughly about 2007. And John's done a great job. He runs the Virginia location. They're, the TCR guys for Audi. I think they're actually supporting a Seat this year in
Oh, nice.
2025. Yeah, for the first time in the U.S. Um, so that's a lot of my background. Obviously, German cars, focusing on making hobbies into careers. I had a really good time, with that, and did a few kind of high profile things back in the day. I think pretty sure I did one of the original car raffles. So in
Oh,
2005, 2006, I actually had imported and built a VW Rally Golf, which is a long story. Technically, it wasn't 25 years old at that time, but anyway.
did you
Um,
reroute it through Canada and back
Canada,
down
yeah,
here?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So those, those cars, that chassis was allowable in the U.S., so it could be imported through Canada. So imported to Canada, federalize it, and then I was able to bring it in as a Canadian car. So technically legit. Um, so anyway, I actually bought that car back just a couple of years ago as a side note, but built that car. It was about 700 wheel horsepower, 740 actually, I think. VR6 turbo,
nice.
GT72, big turbo, O-ringed head, the whole thing. So that was an amazing car. We actually I built that, raffled it off through uh, cooperation with H2O and VW Vortex, and back in the heyday of
Oh yeah,
the
the big boys.
online forums. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but it's kind of a neat story, So as far as VW and Audi is concerned, yes, deeply rooted. We basically started this at the same time as APR. We were really tight with the guys from APR. We were like the top APR dealer for like 10 years in a row. We used to go back and forth, spend some time at their place in Alabama, and so it was kind of a neat backstory, right? We kind of created
Mm.
that whole water cooled VW Audi aftermarket vibe in the Mid Atlantic area, and there was New Speed on the West Coast, and those Rapid Parts up in New York, and a few of those guys, and we kind of all brought that together. And some of the guys I still work with today in other industries are the guys from VW Sport, which ended up being 1552. So
Oh, okay.
Brad Beardo, Matt Crook, those guys. So um, yeah, lots of involvement, lots of history there. Obviously, like you said, BW and Audi definitely migrates into Porsche. Porsche has, Porsche is somewhat unobtainable, even though the prices seem ridiculously low now. But back in the day, if you were driving a $2,500 GTI, in the early 90s, um, you certainly weren't making that leap to a, 15 or $20,000, 911. Um,
Yeah,
it
that makes
was,
sense.
it's different, right? A different scale. But as things progressed, I remember my partner Dave, picked up I think it was like an 85 or 86 Carrera, um, and we did some mods to that at the shop, and then I picked up a 944 turbo. Actually, did a really aggressive build on that, custom turbo, standalone engine management. So it's about 350 at the wheels.
Okay,
Technically,
that's good power.
tech, yeah, technically it was my wife's daily driver, and so so
That's
I
fine.
got the yeah, I was good friends with the guys up at DuPont Motorsports. Being in Maryland, they're right up the road in Delaware, so I used to use their dyno in the early days of NGP, and so we went up there and I installed the standalone and we tuned it on their dyno, and yeah, 350 horsepower, 350 torque. It was impressive, and smoked the engine. The Nicosil cylinder coatings,
Yeah.
only hold up so much when you start dumping a ton of boost into it. So that's how I ruined my wife's daily driver. And
Well, I mean, you gotta
yeah,
be trying to
so
do it. So
yeah, you got to make a concerted effort, which I did in many ways. So got out of that, kind of changed industries, went into the maritime industry, took a few years off from cars, and then kind of reconnected with some friends in the industry, and wanted to actually, have some fun, get back on the track a little bit, which I did a lot when I was younger. So at that stage of life, I would say probably about 8, 10 years ago, then I started to, we had relocated to Florida, which was a great move. Definitely landed in Jacksonville somewhat by chance. Didn't really know the history of Brumos and the history of the Porsche scene in Northeast Florida. It's amazing, obviously, as it's well
I do know.
documented. But so landed in a really good spot at the right time. Um, the values on the newer cars, 996s, 997s, were fantastic, and really just started to have some fun. And then one thing leads to another, and you've got 20 plus cars. I don't know what the count is at this point, but too many cars and multiple shops to keep them in and work on them. And but anyway, it's fun. So I always say it's my stress reliever. So when I hit the reset button, I decided I wanted to. We had done a lot of custom turbochargers and a lot of standalone engine management, and again, spent a lot of time on the track. So I jumped into the Mezger side with the red 996 turbo that I bought from, used to be a USP car. It was one of the first E85 cars that they built. You probably remember, I think when I met you the first time, I had that car. So yeah, so that was a USP shop car, customer build that turned into a shop car. So built motor, big turbos, E85, and that car. I think that car ran. It was in the 700s on low boost, and it was 1,000 horsepower plus package. So
Wow.
had some fun with that, and then like a lot of people, the turbo's fun, but it's a lot. It's a handful. So then you fall in love with the Mezger, and the cars in general, 996s, 997s, fantastic cars, fantastic chassis. Again, um, I bought that car, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, something like that, on the secondhand market. I think I paid like 40 grand for it, right? Fully built motor,
That would be
everything.
nice.
Yeah, I know. So when I decided I wanted a normally aspirated version of the Mezger, I reached out to my buddy Jeff at Florida Performance Cars, and there's a common theme with a lot of people in the industry at the moment, and friends and people we'll see at Amelia Island next week. They were customers of mine at NGP when they were teenagers, right? Because you have this
Yeah.
VW to Audi to Porsche transition, and me having just turned 50 years old, I've been in it long enough that a lot of the people that I interact with now, were teenagers when they were ordering parts from me, and we're building cars for them back in the 90s. So fun fact. But Jeff's a great guy. I've bought a number of cars from him now. He's down Riviera
Mm.
Beach, but highly recommending for a good second hand source for Porsches and all types of performance cars. But
I sold them a BMW.
did you? Okay.
Yeah, a few years back. Yeah, I know Jeff.
Yeah, 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 yeah. He's a good guy. So I just happened to I texted him and I was like, hey, still having fun with the 996 Turbo, because he kind of helped me buy that car originally,
Mm.
kind of put the deal together for me with the guys from USP and all that. So I said, I'd kind of like to add a normally aspirated version to the fleet. So, keep an eye out for 996, 997 GT3. He literally texted back like 30 seconds later and he's like, how about a 2007, GT3 997.1? And I was like, yeah, sure. What's the story? So that's where my cobalt blue car came from, which is
Wow.
still my favorite out of all the cars that I have for sure. Um, and he said, it's next door right now at Orbit Racing. Another shout out; those guys are great.
Oh yeah,
Roger
Orbit's
over Orbit
really good
Racing,
people.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that kind of began a connection with Orbit Racing and Roger as well. But um, so he said, look, I'll let you talk to, Roger next door at Orbit Racing. He can give you the whole background. It belonged to, I believe, a heart surgeon. This was his daily driver. He bought it new. So it's one owner. He has,
Nice.
everything from the first oil change when he took delivery, till today, everything's been done at Orbit. It's all fully documented. The car is solid, but it has been a South Florida daily driver. So, it needs freshened up.
Yeah.
And he sent me some pictures, and I'm uh, it, it, I can say that it's probably one of the better deals that I've ever gotten as well. This was in 2020, right? So 5 years ago,
Okay.
I literally paid $60,000 for that car. So it was 100,000 miles, one
Yeah.
owner, everything done, maintenance wise,
Mm.
all the records. And I mean, yeah, you can't buy a wrecked 997, GT3 for that really anymore. Um, so what it allowed me to do though is really put a lot of money into the car and build it the way I wanted to build it, which is great. But picked that car up, and I did end up eventually selling the 996, the turbo, which had a lot of fun with it. But again, just kind of refreshing and turning over some of the cars in the fleet. I ended up letting
Yeah.
that car go. I think I sold it for 45, right?
I
So
mean, made some money on it. Yeah, so that's good.
which is ridiculous. Yeah, I'd give 45 for it all day long to get it back. But um, yeah, so the Cobalt Blue car, I mean, I had to do a lot. I mean, like window seals. I don't know if anyone has ever embarked on the rear quarter window seals on a 997. It is not
Mm.
for the faint of heart. So the window seal is actually the rubber is encasing an aluminum track that's actually riveted into the body, and of
Oh.
course it goes all the way to the front, all the way around the door.
Mm.
So yeah, so you basically have to have someone professionally remove the glass, and then you have to drill out all the rivets and try to keep them from dropping into the body where it dimples the body panels when they get wedged into the fender liner. It's a yeah. So anyway,
You,
we
you think
don't
they
we don't
would? You think they would use glue? I mean, they use glue everywhere else. Why?
yeah, it's amazing, right? So that's again, there's a lot of things in the car world, especially when you're doing restorations and you're buying things and you're excited about buying them. You have blinders on, right?
Mm.
So when I had never done window seals in a 997, so when I went to look at the car to make the deal to buy it, I was like, oh yeah, those yeah, like you said, I'm sure they're glued in, right? Why wouldn't they be?
That's
And
what I would
then
expect.
yeah, well, surprise. So, and I generally refresh the car, right? So all new brakes,
Mm.
although, nothing's fancy there, just replace them with, OEM rotors, and I think I did Mintex pads, red box, but new Bilstein B16 Damtronic coilovers so that the PASM, works
Yep, so still have
properly.
ASM. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that's I love that setup, especially for the street. Although it performed really well with you guys at Strasse.
Oh yeah,
So
I did.
it's yeah, because it's not really a track car. I don't really take it to the track to beat on it, but it performed well. I was very pleased. So generally refreshed a lot of the running gear. The of course the big project which just wrapped up right before Strasse was the engine build and the transmission rebuild and all the upgrades, right? So it's been, to be honest with you, I had the roll bar built um, by Titan and had it color matched and installed. So it's just been little things all the way through, along, with the maintenance, then also performance upgrades, engine mounts, shift box, cables, you
Did
just go
the
through the whole car.
did the
Yeah, I
engine
mean, it
mounts
had
make a
a
big difference? Because I haven't done my engine mounts yet. I still have the because I have the dot two, so I still have the
yeah, so
controllable ones.
and interestingly, this is a good segue into how, as a person, you transition through what you like and what you don't like, and what your style is and what you're into. Again, having just turned 50 years old, um, I when I first started modifying this car after I bought it in 2020, I did a lot of what I would normally have done, right? So I went with like solid, urethane. I don't remember what brand exactly, but the billet aluminum engine mounts with urethane pucks, and too much, way too much vibration, right?
Which way
So
too much.
yeah, way too much vibration. So it goes this. The way I always frame it is, it's is it a date night car or not a date night car, right? So my wife's very understanding. We've been together since we were 17 years old, so obviously we've grown up together and grown up in the car world together, and she's a saint for everything that she's put up with. Those are stories that could fill another podcast, but as it relates to cars and the cars we've owned and the things that I've put her through. But anyway, it just, at this point, you do want to have a car that you can have fun with and you can take to shows and you can take on a rally. But if I really like the car, if it's something I really truly enjoy, one of my, as I say, keepers, or top three or whatever, cars that don't rotate out ever, they just stay with me. I want to be able to drive all of those. I want to be able to go out, to dinner, and I want to be able to jump in it and drive it, 4 or 5 hours if we're going to DRT or wherever. Um, so that's the measuring stick, and I can't get in a car that's overly loud, or drones like crazy, or rattles and shakes, and it just has to be more civilized. So like with the shift box, I had two different short shifters in the car, and I ended up going back to OEM. I did a 997.2 3RS shift box, which does have metal sleeves, but it is still a plastic box. It has a shorter throw, but it's nice and smooth, and it doesn't transfer vibration. Just little things like that. So I've installed and removed a number of parts on this car as I've kind of transitioned into my next phase of what I like and what I have time for too, right? I don't have a lot of time and a lot of cars, so a lot of them don't get driven. You need things that are reliable, and that they're going to work when you jump in it and take it out. So what I always wanted to do was to build a big displacement, kind of spicy Mezger, normally aspirated Mezger. So that was the car that that was going to be the coup d'etat, the pinnacle of
So was
owning and
that
building that car.
was was that always your vision from you buying it? I mean, you got it pretty
Yeah, exactly.
low
E-
price, so I figured that and
Even
kind of high mileage. So
exactly, yeah. Even back then, even in 5 years ago, when you could buy that car with low mileage and good condition for 100 grand, instead of 150 or 180 or whatever they are now, that was still a good deal. That was a great deal, right? But it was a 100,000 mile car. That's the other funny thing is a lot of people, won't touch a high mileage Mezger car. Not that there's many out there, but we obviously we know of one firsthand,
Oh yeah,
right?
there is one.
T- yeah,
Yeah,
there is
Tom's.
one. Yeah, shout out to Tom. But yeah, so the car ran great. I had them do a compression and leak down. The compression was good. The leak down was, getting to where, it was showing its age a little bit, but it was just marginal. And and the chains were a little noisy, especially if you let the car sit for a while when you first started it. So I knew it was going to get built, right? It was just a matter of when and who and how. So I was actually online, and I think so. This is going back 2 years ago now. Lee Keen had posted up his green car that had just come back from Autometrics with the 4-liter build. So maybe it was a little bit longer, maybe 2.5 years ago. So I messaged him and said, how do you like it? How did it turn out? Because I'd known of Autometrics up in outside Charleston, South Carolina for a while, and Gordon's the owner, and he has a very good reputation. Um, and he said it's great. He said the only thing that's a little bit tricky is the tuning, but the engine build and everything's solid. So I've reached out to Gordon. We talked a couple times over maybe like a year-long period, just kind of, as I was fine-tuning what I wanted to do and
Yep.
kind of getting it figured out. And then at Amelia Island a year ago, right? So a year ago
Yeah.
next week, um, we made plans for him to take the car back with him to Autometrics from the show, from Works basically, and build it. So we went with a 4-liter build. We did the motorsport. I think they're 101.5 millimeter pistons, high compression, and everything fresh, top to bottom, upgraded rods and everything balanced and blueprinted. And the crank, it's a factory RS 4-liter crank, which
Which
is the
there are
most
not
expensive
many
part of the
of,
build. Very
if any
few.
left.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think.
one.
Yeah, yeah. I think Gordon said I can't remember how many they bought, 6 or 8 or something, but he had stockpiled a few of the RS 4-liter, components when they were going obsolete a few years ago. So
Good move.
yeah, yeah, very smart. So, and one of the differences that he suggested, he said, look, we're really buying into the Dundon, program. Obviously, we've all seen the test results, and we know the engineering behind the Dundon, equipment and parts. So he said, we on Lee's car, we did, some of the Dundon stuff, but we didn't do all of it. And we've done a couple like D4 power packages, the whole thing, the intake, the throttle body, the headers, the exhaust, everything on a couple cars that were just stock displacement. The results were very impressive. So he said, if you really want to go all the way with this, he said, let's do the 4-liter build, but let's put the full Dundon D4 power package on it. And that's what we did. And the car made, after Steve Mace here in Jacksonville does all my tuning, he's phenomenal. So after Mace tuned the car, I think we got 456 at the wheels, right? So well over
That's
100 horsepower more,
yeah.
or roughly 100 horsepower more than stock, new stock numbers. So the car absolutely rips. I mean, it just revs. It literally revs like it's forced induction. I mean, it's almost like a two-stroke, with the uh,
Well,
with the
that's the
power
bigger difference
curve.
is the torque. Yeah, that big the bigger liter sizes, but what everybody says from the dot one to the dot
Yeah,
two is the torque feeling, and that's
yeah,
what you want.
yeah. I mean, the car. So we only bumped the red line up, I think, from 84 to 86, if I remember correctly. So it could rev higher, with the upgraded, valve springs and everything that's been done to the car. But it's again, after you make that kind of investment, you do want it to stay alive as well, right? It's
Exactly. You've learned lessons from your 1,000 horsepower 996, so let's kind of
yeah,
keep it to
yeah,
the wild to mildish and
yeah.
daily drivable.
Keep it alive. But yeah, it is definitely daily drivable. It has very good manners. I mean, it just Well, you experienced it when when we were on your
Yeah.
event.
It was just like a normal. It
It's
seems like it's a normal 997 GT3. It wasn't, well,
yeah,
not normal, but
it
it didn't do anything. It
it'll
wasn't angry in different times. It wasn't high
no
strung at any. It was just a normal
no
GT3 ish manners.
no not temperamental at all. I mean, it'll just cruise all day long, or it'll just rip past 8,000 RPMs all day long. It'll do whatever you want it to do, but the car just has so much power and it just revs so quick. But I also had him, rebuild the gearbox. It was getting
I was going to
noisy
ask
and the
that if
shifting
you,
was, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So we didn't change the gearing in the stock 997.1 GT3 transmission, but we did upgrade it to a guards limited slip differential, and we replaced all the bearings, and we did upgrade shift forks, and we put some aftermarket upgraded parts into the gearbox, but we left the gear ratios the same.
Yeah.
And if I'm being honest, that's because the one option I thought I might go after was the parts were on back order. That's the only reason. I mean, otherwise I was willing to try playing with gearing a little bit, but
Mm.
no regrets. I mean, the car runs great. It's definitely everything that I wanted it to be. And I tell you what did happen actually is in this. I've never had this happen on a normally aspirated car. I've built and tuned, I don't know, 1,000 cars, and owning a tuning shop, for over a decade. But it's common to do a chip on a forced induction car, right, where it adds
Mm.
150 horsepower and then you smoke the clutch, right. You tell the customer, you're going to have to upgrade the clutch, you should do the flywheel at the same time, all these things, and they say, just I want the tune, and then they go out and smoke the clutch 2 days later or the same day in some cases. I've never had a car that actually showed drivetrain drama just by upgrading the displacement, and of course all the power that came with that. So what
Mm.
actually happened is the inner CVs on the rear axles went out, so it started vibrating like crazy. It actually kind of smoked the rear axles, which, if you know those cars, those axles are made to hold twice the
Yeah.
horsepower it came with from the factory. So that was kind of a surprise. Didn't think of that. With 100,000 miles and
Oh yeah. I guess you would
being a
have some
daily
age on
driver.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, so the age is something, but it just goes to show how much power the car has. So I put two new factory, brand new axles, not rebuilt, because I had some issues with rebuilt axles over the years. So kind of left me a little, it leaves a little to be desired when you go through all that,
Yeah.
and then you end up with somebody else's problem. So anyway, two new factory axles, and then while we had the suspension apart, I did new control arms and bushings, and just again continually upgrading as I do things. I try to, whatever I'm touching, I try to uh, you know upgrade and replace things as we go, and I think we're pretty much there now. I mean, the car is incredible, does everything I ever wanted and more. Extremely pleased with that. So the other street Mezger, obviously, that we just picked up recently is
Yeah.
the
The white one.
2008, yeah, the white 997 turbo. So um, again, that turbo itch, it never really goes too far away. It's always just
Yeah.
sitting there in the background. So, and I have other cars, and I have other forced induction cars. Even the F-150 that I ordered and just got in, that we're doing the Whipple charger on and all that stuff. I always have a forced induction car sitting around that's
The boost. The boost is
ridiculously.
addicting.
Yeah, it is. It is. I had a Shelby GT500. I don't know if you remember that, a year or so ago, or 2 years ago. I bought
I
that and
remember
just,
there now.
yeah, yeah. So I got a new GT500, owned it for a very short amount of time. Crazy car, you know, but a lot of power. Not much else excited me about it, but the power was nice. Um, so I thought, what, I really love the Mezger engine. Well, I also love the 997, just as a platform is my favorite,
Yeah.
really, if I'm being honest. So um, started looking. I really kind of had a car in mind. I really like the white on the 997 turbo. The wide body in white was something that is attractive to me when it's set up properly and the car's low and it's on the right wheels. And I wanted the cocoa brown leather interior. So I convinced myself that that's what I wanted, and then also convinced myself that I'm safe because it's going to take a while to find one, right? And then I find
Again.
like two or three of them in like a week. I'm
Oh,
like, oh man, this now I got to actually
yeah.
buy something
I
new.
would have.
So
I would think there would be a lot more of a challenge, like for those two
you would think so.
combos. It
You
would,
would think
but
so. Yeah, yeah.
maybe there was others thinking just
So
like you.
yeah, yeah. So I've got a lot of cars that I've bought over the years, couple that I own now, that come through what I think is a process of finding cars that I've kind of perfected over the years. I have a lot of searches that are out, like on cars.com, Car Gurus, eBay, and of course Bring a Trailer and some other, auction platforms. So for specific cars, right? And there's just, specific cars that I know if I find the right car in the right color with the right spec, I'm probably going to buy it, right? If it's a deal, just because
Yeah.
there's a list of cars I like to own. Um, and my my 987 Cayman S turbo with the TPC turbo kit is the same. I found it the same way that I found this white 997 turbo. So I get an alert, from one of these many searches that subscriptions that I have, and it's a white 997 turbo, and I'm like, well, of course it's not going to have leather and cocoa leather interior, and I open the listing and it's got cocoa leather interior, and then I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, it's a dot one, but it's got a dot two rear bumper. And see, a lot of people, when they see things switched around or kind of modified, they get scared. And there's validity to that, because I
What
have bought
happened? There's always
cars.
a bad,
Exactly. I
in your back of your brain going,
That's
"Well,
right. That's right.
why?"
And I've gotten burned, like a lot of people have, with stuff that was not presented well and had shady past. But then there's also cars that people just do stuff, right? They just want something and they do it.
It's their style. Yeah.
It's their style, it's what they like. Or a lot of times people don't really know how to build a car. They know how to buy parts. If you have a credit card and you have the internet, you can buy a lot of parts, right? And there's a
That's true.
lot of cars I bought recently too. Actually, there's a couple of cars that had an amazing assortment of parts, but it wasn't executed well, right? They were just, buy parts, some of them very nice high-end parts, hang them on the car, and then you don't really ever dial the car in. You don't actually, kind of set the car up properly, and the parts don't play well together. The car doesn't feel right, doesn't look right, doesn't perform well. And to me, that's a very easy fix, right? So I'm looking at this listing, and we're out at dinner in St. Augustine. I don't know, it's like 9:30, 9:45 at night. And I'm sitting there looking at this listing that just popped up on my search. And then I look at the engine bay picture, and I'm like, well, there's silicone boost pipes. That looks like an aftermarket intake plenum. Yeah,
Someone's
and
been
I'm
in
like,
here.
yeah, and here's, it has 2B exhaust, I'm looking at it, and I'm like, yeah, there's aftermarket exhaust, and it had aftermarket wheels, and I could tell the car was lowered. So anyway, then I happen to notice it's at Fields in Orlando. So
Oh,
and again, this is like a Sunday night at like 9:45. I text Aaron Mong, the general manager at Porsche Jacksonville. Again, another shout out to, a great guy in the space. Does an amazing job of presenting an enthusiast approach to the dealer experience. Just can't say enough good about what he's done with Porsche Jacksonville and the transition from Brumos, and really kind of stabilized and preserved that history really well. So shout out to them. So I text him and with this listing, and I said, hey, this is this is at a Fields dealership. Can you bring this car up to Porsche Jacksonville, which is also owned by Fields Automotive Group? And he's like, well, funny, because they offered me that car when they took it in on trade, but I saw the aftermarket bumper and I saw the aftermarket wheels, and I was just like,
so
I
he
don't
did
know.
the.
Is
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, right? Anyone who knows cars, like, you look at it, you're going to go one of two ways. You're going to be like, no, that car, it's somebody's been in there, they've messed with too many things, or hey, I can buy a car at or actually below market value because of these changes, and it probably, it may have 10, 15, 20 grand worth of upgrades. And fortunately
It's
for me, it
beneficial.
was the latter. Yeah, so he's like, look, I can have the car, tomorrow if you want it. I'll call and bring it up and let's take a look at it and see if it's legit. So he did. So like within 2 days, he transfers the car up, I think on Monday. Tuesday, I go by, check it out. He's already got it on the lift and we're crawling under it. And it's like everything, aftermarket everywhere, like sway bars, coilovers, like,
Oh, nice.
every bolt-on engine bar, headers, high flow cats, exhaust, upgraded intercoolers, IPD plenum, GT3 throttle body, full silicone boost hose kit. Um, and the car is this funky, crazy interior spec, which I couldn't really pick up on. So it has gloss silver hard surfaces throughout the interior. The steering wheel, the armrest, the dash inserts, the backs of the seats are the hardback seats are gloss silver. So it's white with
Mm,
cocoa brown leather, like fully decked out with this crazy amount of um, factory gloss silver hard surface coatings everywhere. So
mm.
not saying it's my favorite thing in the world. It's a little, it's a
It
little
seems like
in
an
your
odd
face, but
choice
it is
to
odd,
mix with
but
a cocoa.
exactly. But then you learn that the car was sold new in Hawaii, and I'm like, well, okay. So there's plenty of eclectic people in Hawaii. So somebody ordered this car literally, and it was delivered to Porsche of Honolulu in this crazy spec. You just got to love that kind of backstory. So somebody went through the expense and time to spec this car out with all this crazy stuff. I'm just going to honor it, right? Now, I
Mm.
have thought recently that, if I wanted to actually do something a little different, I could even just have white vinyl wrap put on all the silver surfaces, which I think would really
That way you can
pop.
protect it.
So, yeah, so I might play with that when I get the car back. Um, Spoiler alert, it's at Autometrics now. We just dropped it off last week for big turbos and some engine work and a bunch of stuff. So to be continued.
Seems to be
But anyway,
a
it's
4 liter
just
with big turbos.
yeah, no, we're not going that far on this one. But you don't have to, right? That's the nice thing. I mean, it
No.
just, we're going for 750 to 800, on pump gas, 93 octane.
Nice.
Again, daily driverable, transmission upgrades, um, pin the cams, the coolant lines had not been pinned, and
Do you
so
do
they were
penning or
starting to
welding?
leak.
Are you a
So
pen guy or a weld guy?
yeah, yeah. So on my Cobalt Blue GT3, they are welded, and Orbit Racing did that. But Gordon at Autometrics prefers to pin the pipes, and there is some reasoning behind that because it's hard to not get too much heat into the pipes, and then they can actually leak because of connections and flanges that are now suddenly out of true. And so but again, Autometrics specializes in race cars. They
They'll figure it out.
manage, they I'm not going to second guess it, and if he says I'll stand behind it forever, if we do it my way, I'm going to let him do it his way, right? So
Good.
they're going to be bonded, rebonded, and they're going to be pinned, and we're going to roll with that. So yeah, we're going to do a nice build on that car. It's going to be, yeah. But you've seen the car, right? So the factory, it has like the aero front chin spoiler, like all those things were factory ordered,
Yeah.
right? And they're all body color.
Oh,
So it's a cool car. I put some LMs on it. I've got E88s on most everything else, but I wanted to, again, just kind of, I think the LM looks really good on that car as a nice dish, in the back that
yeah,
works with the
nice
wide
lip on there.
body. And yeah, yeah, has enough of a lip to actually kind of reflect the wide body, a little bit, and I think it sets up nice. So so that will be, and I did drive the car, right? So I put, when I bought the car a couple, well, 3, 4 months ago, um, Jacob and I, my son, we both spent a good bit of time with the car, drove it around, Had some fun with it, and there's a lot of other things I'm going to do too. I mean, the list is actually like a mile long, but I'm going to do the BBI clutch slave module to get rid of that, factory
The
clutch
the
assist,
weird
numb.
clutch assist, yeah, it's
That's
the
a
worst.
terrible, what a
I mean,
horrendous thing to do to that
it's.
car.
I mean, mindset. I understand. Like, okay, what if somebody daily drives this and is in traffic? Let's help them out, or they're 1,000 years
Yeah.
old.
You know what
Like
I would do if
those are the
they,
two scenarios. But
yeah, I was going to say if they complain about a factory, GT car clutch without assist, then they should just be smacked and have the car taken away from them. They should be
well,
punished,
this isn't the car for you. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Go, find something different.
So
So
I was
that,
curious. I
yeah,
don't mean to cut you off on the build, but
yeah.
so between the 996 and the 997, you had both had them built. Drivability, is it virtually the same? Is it like crazily different? I mean, because the chassis are, I feel like, are pretty close.
Yeah, you think they are, and I've said that to people for a long time. It really doesn't make a difference between 996, 997. But I don't know. It actually does, and I don't know if it's just the vibe of the car, because obviously the interior is quite different. The touch surfaces are different. The styling is different. Obviously, the 997 interior. I'll put it this way. That phenomenon where you wash the car and it actually feels like it's faster, like it picked
Okay.
up 10 horsepower because you cleaned it. So there's definitely a perception. What you see and what you touch and what you feel gives you a different perception. And I've just always felt like the 997s that I've been in have been more crisp, more modern, maybe tighter, more responsive.
Yeah.
And in fact, you're right. I mean, the chassis is extremely similar, if not, identical in a lot of ways, the underpinning and the geometry on the suspension, all those sorts of things, right? So now when you get to 997.2, like your car, I mean, there's some changes in, obviously the knuckles and the steering and the setup for the wheel attachments. And when you dig into a few of the mounting points, there are some differences. But yeah, I just can't help but comment that the 997 turbo definitely feels more refined. Um, and again, the 996 turbo that I had was a relatively, vanilla
Yeah.
spec, whereas this car is, 18-way adjustable seats, and I mean, all of the upgraded interior surfaces and everything else. It just feels more refined. Now, one of the things that I did feel that for the power the car was making with everything that was done to it, it felt more numb, right? It wasn't quite as exciting as other cars I've had with say 500 to 600 horsepower, which is what it should be putting down with all the work that was done to it, just with the bolt-ons, and of course it had software and everything. But it does feel like a bigger car. It feels a little bit heavier, but again, you got that just crazy clutch pedal numbness and all the other stuff that came with the dot one that I think really just kind of messes up the feel. So I expect when we get the car back, we're doing the pure 68 millimeter turbos. And again, we're shooting 750 to 800, right? So not as crazy as the other car, but also on pump gas. The other one was E85 set up, so that was kind of a pain in the ass as well. But I have a feeling that we'll get some of that aggressiveness, some of that raw feel out of the car with all of the changes that we're going to make to it, and it'll kind of feel more like the 996. But that 996 was just, I mean, it was just good. It was really well built, and it had been built and rebuilt multiple times as USP had like kind of refined their E85 program, and it had two different size turbos. So the car was pretty well developed, but that car was just, I mean, like scary. It was just so
Well, I mean, it's a
raw, and
lot
it
of
was
power
just
for anything.
so
So
it's
that's
a
that makes
it's
sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a lot of power, and and in a like a basic spec car, right, which is the the cooked leather that's like as hard as my desk, kind of thing. Nothing was plush. Everything was, that car lived its whole life in South Florida as well, and it was, it was kind of a test mule, so everything was a little bit worn and kind of, you know harsh. So anyway, that's going to serve that purpose. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Maybe that car will show up in the mountains, and you'll get to see that one immediately upon delivery, like
That's how you like to do it. Finishes it, and then
I
just go take it on the mountain
yeah,
to
yeah,
figure it out.
just get one break-in oil change at 500 miles, and then
Yeah.
put it on a trailer and take it to the mountains. So excited for that. And then of course the other Mezger car, which I absolutely love, is the Red Bull car. So the that car is actually a 2006. So technically, first year 997, and it was a Grand Am car. I bought that through Roger at Orbit Racing. It belonged to one of the other owners of Orbit Racing for a period of time. Um, but it was a Tafel Racing team car. So they, at one time, they were Porsche and Ferrari, um, and they campaigned a number of cars, including the in Grand Am. So this car had, I believe, two stablemates, and then they ran a couple in the class up, which would have been, were they nine? They were GT3 R maybe, or I don't know if they called it an R back then. This is like 2006,
No,
7, 8.
they'd have probably still
But
been. Well, they might have been. Well, no,
so
it might have been
so the
ours.
difference, so they were wide body, with the front flares, and they had center lock. But the Grand Am cars, like the one we have, had to stay five lug. Roger at Orbit Racing is just, he is the king of this, trivia on these cars, because he was actually on the team that, or part of the team that converted those cars to Grand Am spec. So
Oh,
it would come in as a cup car because that's all Porsche sold at the time, and then it was converted into a Grand Am car, and being converted into a Grand Am car, it got different fenders, different bumpers, different hood, different doors. So everything, all those panels on this car are carbon. They're also a little more aggressive than obviously the Cup car version, and it's got the dry brake fuel system and all that stuff. So they were also sequential, which this car
that's cool.
is sequential gearbox, but of course it's the original version, so it's a clutched
Yeah.
gearbox. So when you're starting off, you're using the clutch, and you use the clutch for downshifting, but it's sequential on upshifts. So no ABS, really a handful. So this car is the only survivor of that Tafel Racing group, and again, I think there were three cars total. There may have actually been four. Two of the cars survived their professional racing career. Mine, and I think mine was the number 73, I believe, and then number 74 survived and then was totaled by a privateer in like a club race or something. So mine is it's the only one left from that group. Um, when I got it from Roger, it had been modified for aero. There were, they took those ultra rare, basically non-existent carbon fiber
Yeah.
body panels and cut arrow holes and put vents and screens and
Oh,
mesh everywhere. And yeah, that really hurt. So that cost a lot of money, and no one would touch those body panels. I finally found a boat fiberglass repair guy who took the job on, and I mean, it cost me, it was thousands of dollars, but he basically used all the fenders and bumpers, the original ones, and he had to basically fill and blend everything to close up all of those modifications. And he did a great job. So, and then what I did is I put the car back. I could have picked any number of liveries. So this car was run by Eric Lux, is one of the guys that ran this car. Um, his family's company is called Rembrandt Charms. They're up in New York. Really nice guy. I've talked to a few people who professionally raced this car. after the
That's cool.
fact, and everybody has fond memories of the car. It did very well. It ran the Rolex in 2006, 7, and 8. Uh, Never won in its class that I could see, but this car has raced over 200 sanctioned events in its
Oh
history.
wow, that's a lot.
Just by, yeah. Cool thing about Cup cars, from Porsche, you can actually take the VIN number and search it, and there's multiple racing databases where you can actually pull up history on these cars. It's pretty fun. So the one year, which was, I believe, '07. So it was the second year this car ran the Rolex, and only at the Rolex, it was in Red Bull livery. So the story behind that is that I guess it was the owner or the owner's son of Tafel Racing was actually dating the daughter of the guy who founded Red Bull. So,
Okay.
so this is the only car of this level, Grand Am level, like entry level professional racing, that ever was sponsored by Red Bull back then, because they only sponsored, F1 and everything that was much
Yeah,
higher.
top tier stuff.
Um, yeah, so that was an interesting story. Had not validated that, but that's the story I was told, and that's why this car ended up with Red Bull livery for one race and one race only, which was the 2007 Rolex 24-hour race. So what's really enjoyable with that kind of provenance is you can actually just Google, 2007 Rolex 24 hours at Daytona, and you can find pictures of the car, pictures of the team with the car, pictures of the car during the race, right? It's so much
Yeah.
fun when you own a car that has that kind of history and legacy behind it. So we put it back to that livery, which is fantastic. People really love the car when it's out. I'm ashamed to say we have not really tracked the car. Um, so when I bought it from Orbit Racing, it was still being used as like a club racer. I mean, the car, even with all
Oh,
the history and the value and the
did they
the original
realize
Grand
that the people that
Ams.
had the car, like, or they just didn't
Yeah,
care?
so a little bit, but not as much. So interesting story. So again, Roger actually was part of the team that modified these cars into Grand Am spec. He actually does know the guy who owns the molds for the body panels. It's just that there's none in production, but at worst comes to worst, actually there is a guy in South Florida that owns the molds still to rebuild these. But they were maintaining the car, so it's got a fresh motor. Supposedly is a 4 liter. We don't know that, again, to be sure. It runs very well and it's low hours and it's fresh. Gearbox was freshened up. I mean, there's a lot of the car's in very good mechanical condition. We really just gave it you know an overhaul from an aesthetic point of view. But it does have some updated electronics. It does have a newer Motec system for engine management. So the car was well maintained in its current form. But when I made the deal with Roger to buy the car, which again, just one of those weird situations. I can't even remember exactly how I found out that he had it. Maybe we were messaging. I was messaging with him, kind of the same thing as my Cobalt Blue car. I think at one point I said, "Hey, if you find a good deal on a 997 GT3 Cup car, let me know." And he responded with something
Mm.
like, "How about a Grand Am car with some history?" But he didn't even know the history. So after we made the deal, I hadn't even picked the car up yet. I was researching and found all this information. I sent it to him, and he's like, "Wow, this is crazy because I remember this car, and this car is actually pretty special." And he started telling me the Red Bull story and all that stuff. And he's like, "Hey, would you be interested in selling it back to me?" So yeah, I said, "No, I think I'm pretty good with it. I
Mm.
think I paid literally
Yeah.
like 68 grand for the car, right? So even as a cup car,
Yeah.
that's cheap." So
Mm.
so he kind of brokered the deal, not paying a whole lot of attention to it. We made the deal, and then before I even picked it up, he's offering to buy it back once he figured out which car it actually was, because it wasn't recognizable. I'll say, with all the modifications, it didn't
Yeah,
really
because you
hit
said you had
very
to
hard.
do a lot of. That's crazy that they did all that, and they didn't. I guess if you didn't know, you don't know, and you're just like, hey, it needs to be
Well,
to
yeah,
whatever
you're
spec
just
I'm
thinking
doing.
it's a cup car, maybe with some aftermarket panels, right? If you don't
Yeah.
actually dig into it and start looking at the history, you don't realize this car raced in Mexico. This car raced, I mean, the history, um, in the fact that this car's ne's never had a major hit. It's all original chassis. Like the body is perfectly straight. Like it's crazy, right?
Almost
So
more of a reason to keep it off track. But but I
yeah,
mean, but what's the
well,
fun in
still
that?
no ABS, you know. So yeah, I mean, we're going to track it just for fun, but ultimately, what I'd really like to do is do some HSR events with the car.
That's what I was going to ask, if you want to do
Yeah,
HSR or
yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah. That's really the goal, and that's why we're holding on to the car is and especially with the, you know, the Red Bull livery and kind of the unique history of the car and the unique history of it in that livery, you know, only running one race. I think we have something pretty cool. You know, it's worth getting it back on the track.
Would you just
Um,
do Daytona for the HSR race, or would you, or is there a
I think
different
so.
track? Or
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, just local. Maybe we do a couple events just as a warm up, you know, for Daytona. But to me, I mean that's the most fun. I enjoy, you know, the HSR Classic at Daytona. I enjoy that event more than I enjoy the Rolex. Um,
that's common.
I I
It's
know.
just
I was going to say
less
that
crowded, just more intimate
less.
in the garages. Like it's a lot better
Exactly.
experience.
Exactly. It's, you know, whenever that dynamic of having basically a car show for race cars, which by the way, they're also racing at the same time. It's
Yeah,
like there's nothing better than that, really. And I've told a lot of people and I've actually gotten people to attend that event now over the past 2, 3 years who have never attended, like myself. I had never attended until just a few years ago. And I'm like, you know, you really if you're really an enthusiast, and it's not just a Porsche thing, right? I mean, there's
no, it's in everything.
some of my yeah, some of my favorite cars, you know, at that event are, you know, some of the Trans Am cars from the late '80s, you know, stuff like that. I mean, you know, it's there's
And a
some
lot of them have
vintage.
history. That's the cool part too. Like
They
they
do,
kind of vet
they do,
that thing out for the most part. They're, like at one
they
time I
do. Yeah,
saw one of the Bentleys that they do the Euro racing with that never makes it over
hmm
here. One of the GT3 cars, which I was like, that's pretty
that's
cool.
right.
And then I learned that none of it's like not Bentley at all, except for maybe the A pillar. They're like, this
Yeah,
is not even close.
yeah, yeah. It's that's pretty common. Yeah, yeah. So. No, but so those that's kind of the, you know, and there's stories, you know, there's stories in between the stories, but
Yeah,
that, you know, the Mezger cars, I mean, the history is kind of cool, right? I mean, it's well, it's interesting. You know, Mezger was part of just about every engine that was built at or designed at Porsche up until, you know, he retired in 1994. The Mezger engine, what we call the Mezger engine, actually didn't even come around until years after his retirement, right? So,
yep.
but so to have a car, to have an, you know, well, the cars are great too, but to have an engine, which is really the heart of the car, that was designed by, you know, one of the most famous engineers in automotive history, you know, specifically with Porsche, as you know, of course,
Yeah.
and to have that same basic engine design and landscape from, you know, the GT1, you know, in your street car. I mean, it ticks all the boxes, you know. I mean, it just,
But
and then to be able to have it in normally aspirated and forced induction, it really just
for it
takes
to be able to
that.
handle both is probably an unnatural occurrence. Then that it
Yeah,
does it so well and can be powered up to crazy feats, and then there's
yeah,
F1 lineage and wrapped up in there with his design
that's
stuff
right.
too.
That's
It's
right.
pretty.
Yeah,
It does have an
yeah.
insane story that he was able to be involved in so many things, and he's the only engine engineer that I'm kind of follow or aware of that. So
I would have to agree. There's probably not many, you know, engine engineers or engine designers who have, you know, the following that he has. But I mean, what a story, right? I mean, how many people stay, you know, basically are at a company and stay there through like the entire, you know, maturation
yeah,
and development of really a brand. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's a shame, you know, that of course he passed, you know, in the last couple of years, but what an amazing story, and it just really kind of adds to the to the entire legacy of Porsche as a whole. It's just different, right? It's different. Driving
yep.
a Porsche is different. Um, the sound is different. You know, the how the cars are developed, how little the car has changed from a really a fundamental design aspect over so many years, decades and decades and decades. It's just it's fantastic. It's fun to be a Porsche fan. Um, and I, once you get hooked, you're kind of there, right? But
Yep.
you can, as you know, you can go out and buy a well preserved or even modified Boxster. I know I'm going to take heat for
Yep.
this. For for 5, 6 grand or 8 grand or whatever, you really can't say that you can't have the Porsche experience unless you spend a ton of money, because you can.
Yep.
The Boxster we have, the 986, it's an early car. It's a 97, has cloth seats, which I've never seen in a Boxster before. We'll talk about that when you launch your Boxster podcast. But
Yep.
anyway, cool car. But we're doing a safari build on that. And we're doing the coilovers with 3 inches of lift, and we're doing skid plates. But that car is still in stock form as our test mule. We just drove it,
Yep.
from the old shop to the new shop as we're moving cars over to this new warehouse space. And that car is an absolute blast. I mean,
Yeah, it
stock.
handles like it
it
shouldn't, and
it
it's
handles it.
lightweight,
It
and it's
pulls.
just
It
something
has
about it. Yeah,
shifts great. I mean, it's a base model first year, Boxster, 2.5 liter with 144,000 miles. It's had the IMS done and clutch and everything, but I mean, you can enjoy Porsche without spending six figures. But if you get to that point, and you're able to do that, then it's just exponentially better as you go up through the cars, and especially into the Mezger world.
yep,
Um,
for sure.
but yeah, it's a great brand. It's a great fellowship of people and enthusiasts that really support the brand. The dealers, I mean, having good shops, and especially having a good enthusiast based management structure of your local dealership, just again
Makes a
makes the
big difference
experience so much better. Yeah, it really does.
for
So
sure.
we have all of that here. I know it exists in other places too, but Northeast Florida, we just,
Well, it's a
we
rarity.
really.
I was gonna say earlier too. It's refreshing to hear you say the Volkswagen stuff started on the East Coast, because so much. And I don't know. I don't. Not that I struggle with it, but there's so many things that kind of just feel like just it's being based in the West Coast that it's now a thing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
That's cool.
yeah,
It's cool that it's happening on the East Coast. One
yeah,
quick plug for the East Coast is your Six Mix event happening at
yeah,
Amelia after works. So if you
yeah,
want to do
yes.
something after works, that's something.
That is, we've had a lot of fun with that the last couple of years. We've kept it kind of low key, just kind of letting it build up organically. But look, that's my buddy Matt Crook, who owned 1552 Wheels, um, and myself have kind of put that together, with a lot of help and assistance from friends and people in the industry. And we have some new sponsors for this year. Porsche Jacksonville, FCP Euro has sponsored for a couple of
Nice.
years now. They're our top tier sponsor for this year. And again, going back to the story I told earlier, Mokama Beer Company, the brewery there, it's in a 1940s Ford dealership in Fernandina Beach, on Amelia Island. It's an amazing spot. The general manager of the brewery is another. His name's Matt Hare. He's another one of those guys who literally was a customer of mine when he was 16 years old, back in Maryland. And it's just funny how things come around. He's still a car guy. He's retired from the Coast Guard now. He's lived all over the world. Ended up settling here in Jacksonville. So we got this, just this great synergy. And uh, Matt's company, it's called 10%, and it's a marketing company. They support my other businesses with marketing and web and social and all those things. But so him and the team, Nevin and Mark and Gavin, those guys do a great job. They're out in Southern California. um, they, we were all talking a couple of years ago, and it's like, man, works is cool, right? It's kind of a way to kick off the weekend. But works is over by like 3, 4 o'clock. Everybody goes home,
Yep.
and if you go out into town, it's all scattered and everybody's going everywhere, and you can't get in to any restaurants because the island is packed for the Concours. And I said, I think I got a hookup for us. We can go to this brewery and we can, have a get together and we can hang out and it'll just be cool. But we're all in our 40s to early 50s, late 40s to early 50s. We've been in the scene. We don't need a hot import nights kind of vibe. It's like, what do we like? We like to socialize. We love our cars. we're a mature group. We're family people, right? We want a family setting where we can actually hang out and people can bring their kids and the spouses and everybody can have a good time. And so that's what it is. Six Mix is we call it a flat six mixer event, so which is kind of a nod to the old school, get together, hang out, kind of mixer vibe. So you show up, it's not pretentious at all. Everybody can just have a good
No.
time. The sponsors are awesome, right? FCP Heroes, like, the first 50 beers are free, to when the event opens at 5. So it'll be from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. We have live music, we have food trucks, we have just again, great spot. We'll have some curated cars on display in the brewery itself, and then we'll have like some feature cars around the outside of the building, and then we have multiple parking lots that we'll use for general parking. Doesn't cost anything. There's free giveaways from FCP and Porsche Jacksonville, and so it just, we're excited. This year is going to definitely be much bigger than last year, which was more than the year before. So it's kind of gaining some momentum, but it's a get together, it's a gathering for us, right?
Yep.
You, me,
the more enthusiast, chill, like
that's
that
right.
type person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And we're also hoping, that this can be put together and to kind of attach to other events around the country too, right? So it's not just going to be Amelia, possibly as soon as next year. We'll maybe attach this to a couple other major car events, around the country. So yeah, it's fun. Looking forward to it.
Well, I mean, we covered everything I wanted to talk about, and I learned some new things, and I learned some history about your cars that I didn't know. So,
yeah,
look forward to seeing you. I'll probably be at Amelia. We'll see. Still in the. It's only a couple weeks away, so I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Hopefully we see you there. It'll be a good time. It always is. We got a couple cars in Radwood. We got a couple cars at Works, and then of course we'll have some cars. The Red Bull car will be on display at the brewery for the whole week, like starting I think Tuesday or Wednesday. So if you're in the area and you get there early, you can always go by and grab a beer and gawk at that a little bit. It's a pretty neat piece. So
I think your next purchase might need to be a semi, but
yeah.
Things around.
Yeah, it's not out of the question, I guess. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining and chatting me up. So
yeah,
we can end it here.
Thank you for listening to the Mezgers Only podcast. Please check us out on Instagram at Mezgers Only or on the website at mezgersonly.com. See you next episode.